Good morning or afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, from wherever you may be joining us, if it's early in the morning or late in the afternoon. We thank you very much for taking the time to join us today for what we think is a very interesting and important topic within the industry. My name is Alex Rolfe. I'm the Managing Director of Payments, Cards and Mobile. And thank you very much to our partners in this webinar in Worldline. Today, we're talking about AI, artificial intelligence in banking and payments. And we certainly feel that AI is going to reinvent the consumer experience. And we have some great speakers here today who are at the cutting edge of what's going on in AI and banking and the personal experience to talk us through it. Firstly, a few housekeeping issues. This is a live event, of course. All the speakers are speaking live, and the Q&A at the end is live as well. If you have any technical issues, then please use the console in front of you. We have a team of people at Workcast who will be able to help you as quickly as possible, and they'll help you sort that out. As I mentioned, there's a live Q&A at the end, and we have three great speakers. So please feel free to ask your questions either at the end, or if you want to pop it in the questions box as we go along, that's absolutely fine as well. If your query relates to a specific slide, then please do make reference to that in the question, and then we can quickly get to it whilst we're answering them. For your information, the recording of this presentation and webinar will be made available to all people that have registered at the end, and also we'll be sending it out so you can share it with your colleagues. So as I mentioned, thank you to our partners at Worldline, and I would like now to pass on to Mathieu Barthelemy, who will take you through as the first speaker. So Mathieu, welcome, please.
Thanks, Alex. Hi, everyone. So I'm Mathieu Barthelemy, working at Worldline as a lead product manager, especially focused on how I can help my customers, so banks and financial institutions, in their digital transformation. And I am in charge of our Worldline digital banking platforms, so platforms that we are developing for customers to help them on several aspects. The open banking one, but also on other topics such as conversational topics, which will be part of the presentation today. Please, I'll let you, George, introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you, Mathieu. Hello, everyone. My name is Georg Ludvigsson. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Manika. Manika is a global leader in personal finance innovation. We're an innovation partner to many of the leading banks in the world, helping them create better customer experiences and new revenue streams. And many of those projects we work with banks on involve personalization and AI algorithms. So looking forward to the discussion today.
And hello, my name is Maika. I am a conversational strategist and UX designer. I've been working in conversational with bank and finances industry and other industries for over a few years now. And I'm really looking forward to this presentation today, as it will be joining both very practical insights into what conversational means for finance and banking. And I'll leave it to you, Mathieu, to continue forward.
Yeah. I'm on. And why we are here today, why we are speaking about reinventing user experience and customer experience today is because Maika and ourselves at Worldline are working on a product currently to support our customers to work on the personal conversational banking topic, bringing the expertise of our three companies clearly because we are convinced that it will be the new way to engage customers in the coming months and coming years. And to start, I just want to take a few minutes to share with you what are the landscape of the banking industry today. I'm quite sure that a big part of you are aware that the banking landscape is currently undergoing a strong mutation, which has started in the last decade, especially due to four main factors. New regulation first, with the PSD2, the GDPR and new AML rules, for instance, but also due to strong expectations from end users who are looking for digital services which are more proactive, more personalized, more real-time, and at the end, more easy to use. The rise of new technologies, which is another factor, especially around artificial intelligence, and it will be the topic today, and the blockchain as well, which is another quite interesting topic. And at the end, the fourth factors is the rise of new entrants, such as neobanks, fintechs, and also the GAFAs, of course. That said, clearly we are in a landscape where the classical and historical role of bank is changing a lot and is disrupted. And I will just let the floor to Georg, who will also, I think, put the light on some competition and its vision about the landscape. So, Georg, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Matthew. I think what embodies the trends, mega trends we are seeing in the landscape today is in many ways the rise of the neobanks, which are currently defining what good looks like in terms of mobile banking. Of course, there are many other trends happening, as you mentioned, like rise of open banking, transition to cloud and SaaS, and all sorts of APIs and building blocks emerging that offer all sorts of new capabilities. But it's the rise of the neobanks that is probably one of the most prominent. And I want to put that in context with what the topic of today. So we are now seeing, the neobanks, and this is probably most pronounced in the UK, where they are getting substantial tractions with several million users, very well funded, and so on. So what's happening is it's a gradual thing. Most of the incumbents still maybe have the salary account, but what they are increasingly seeing is kind of loss of transactions. They might see in their bank account salary in, mortgage out, and utility 1 and 2 out, and then transfer to Monzo and nothing else for the rest of the month. So they're losing those customer touch points. And now we're at the level where 1 in 3 of UK millennials say that their primary banking relationship is with a challenger bank, although that in most cases is mixed. It's both with a challenger bank and someone else. But it's clear that this is getting really serious. And taking that a bit further, I think what Apple is doing with Apple Pay and their Apple credit card that they launched in the US last year and is coming to Europe this year is very interesting. They are doing in many ways similar things that the neobanks have done: simple user experiences, simple onboarding, and they seem to have also this cult-like following, like customers that are more like fans rather than customers, unlike most banks. And they seem to be doing a lot of the things that the neobanks have pioneered. And I think the interesting question is here in the topic of AI and personalization is, why are people switching? And I think it's obvious if you look at the functionality and the marketing of the neobanks. It's not because, at least not yet, because they have super sophisticated algorithms or AI solutions. It's because they've got the simplicity right. The onboarding is super simple. They're telling people in very simple terms where they are spending the money, with whom they are spending the money. Very simple PFM, and helping people understand where their money is going, and simple kind of loyalty or cashback solutions, which you see in all of these guys have. So I think, and the interesting point to note here is relatively few of these have any of those sophisticated technologies. Revolut does have a chatbot, but I think most people would agree that's probably the worst part of their user experience. But this is all coming. But it's interesting that it's not about AI or sophisticated algorithms. It's about kind of use cases, what people connect to. So trick here is to start simple, start with the small data and simple personalization, but then gradually move to the more sophisticated things. And that, I think, brings us to the second part, which is to talk about personalizations. What do we mean by personalization? Most mobile banking apps still more or less look the same to people. Of course, they have different transactions and bills and amounts in there, but they all look quite the same. To me, I think in the most simplest term is that personalization is the difference between some valuable advice and spam, something irrelevant. And that's a huge difference. It's simple, but making it real is not easy. That getting that right can be extremely hard, but if you get it right, then that's a kind of very strong competitive advantage. And in some cases, that can involve very sophisticated kind of technology like AI. In other cases, it involves something much more simpler. So I think it's helpful to keep that in mind. To illustrate with kind of what my company is working on, everything we do with banks to help create better user experiences is you can say that is based on creating some kind of stories or use cases from transaction data. So we work with transaction data from bank accounts, credit cards, and try to kind of figure out interesting things about people's lives to help them basically with everyday money management. And if you think about it, like people's transactions, they tell us an awful lot about yourself. You can figure out where you work, kind of what your hobbies are, where you live, and so on. There, almost everything there is to know about a person, you can get clues from people's kind of spending profiles. And I think we're still at a very early stage of kind of doing a good job of using that data to create something interesting for people. And it's simple things that you start with, things like discovery, which merchants might I like based on my current spending habits? Kind of how are my expenses trending? Can you find me discounts? Can you help me spend smarter and save? I want to save more for my kind of future. Can you help me do that? I think we are at a very early stage in helping people with these questions. But it's been our kind of defining vision of Manika that digital banking needs to evolve from a place to transact into more of a financial coach type user experience that tries to answer those questions. If we then look at some more examples. So one of the things that we are currently working on as an example of personalization that is not using kind of sophisticated AI algorithms, and then we'll have another example later, is helping people understand their environmental impact. It turns out that by looking at a people's transaction history, you can do a pretty good rough estimate of their carbon footprint. For every dollar spent in a grocery store or on fuel or on airfare, if you take the average CO2 output for every dollar and kind of sum that up over a month or a year, you get a pretty decent estimate of people's carbon footprint. It's not perfect, but it's much better than what kind of manual entry that most people don't bother doing. And for most practical purposes, it's fine. If someone wants to then offset their carbon footprint using a certified carbon offsetting service, making that really seamless and interesting. So this we think is a good example of making kind of it feel personalized. There's a lot of people that kind of want to take action against climate change. It's not about giving them a bad conscience, but giving them the option to understand, kind of get this estimate, and then if they want to take action, choose from in a very easy way from certified projects. So this would be an example of an innovative way using transactions to create a service that some people would really appreciate, and this is something we are working with several banks in Europe on these days. But then if we kind of move beyond personalization and look at specifically kind of the AI aspect, I'm going to hand it back to Matthew to introduce that topic. Matthew, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Sorry. Yeah, I was saying that we already used the buzzwords AI or artificial intelligence a lot during the beginning of this webinar, and I found it was maybe interesting just to share with the audience some information around what is really hidden behind these big buzzwords. So the people you can see on the slides, the Harman is in fact one of the traders of the artificial intelligence. So it's John McCarthy, who had defined in the 50s the term artificial intelligence while he was working on algorithms and programs to solve problems on the chess game typically. And what you just need to understand is that artificial intelligence is much more families of technologies that could be applied to accomplish a task that human could execute. And into these big families, there are subset of technologies that are especially used to qualify data, and that can be also used to be in interactions between the end users. So inside the artificial intelligence family, there is the machine learning technologies that can be used. And if I have to summarize in few lines what is machine learning, basically it means it's practice of using algorithms to pass data, to learn from this data, and to make and find a solution to a problem. If I take an example in the banking industry, for instance, you can think to a problem which is, okay, I need to determine if a transaction is fraudulent or a genuine one due to its attributes, for instance, and you can resolve such problem thanks to a large data set of transactions which have already been qualified as a fraudulent one or genuine one. Inside the machine learning family, there is the deep learning technologies, which is, in a nutshell, just a boosted machine learning approach where problems will be solved thanks to several layers, as your brain trying to solve problems thanks to your neurons networks. If I have to take a simple example on an industry field where deep learning algorithm is applied, for instance, I can take the example of trying to analyzing images to steer self-driving car, for instance. And in such problem, for instance, you will have two kind of layer, which will be in charge for the first one, for instance, to analyze the image to check and to detect the landmines, and another layer who could be used to detect cars or oscillators. So it's a more complex algorithms and a more complex approach. That being said, why it's a revolution? If you have a look on some figures on the global investment, for instance, last year's investment in artificial intelligence has reached more than $35 billion. with a strong increase compared to 2018, an increase of 44%. So there are lots and strong investments on such technologies, which are also expect to more than double in the 2 next years to reach $80 billion, meaning it's clearly a revolution. And the question is, okay, this is definition of artificial intelligence, and there is lots of technologies behind, but to solve which problems? And especially if we are taking our problem, which is delivering delightful experience to the end users, beautiful digital experiences, and especially to answer to 4 problems that customers have. So if I just have to summarize the 4 expectations of the end user, which are: I want to have more convenience, more instantaneity into my services. I want to have personalized service and consistency between the usages. On an artificial intelligence perspective, it means for me trying to solve 4 main problems. The first one is solving a problem of knowledge by applying rule-based engine, for instance, to be able to categorize data and to qualify data. The second point is to answer to a reasoning problem. Based on the qualified data and using probabilistic programming, for instance, you will try to generate some insights, okay, that will be consumed in the full customer journeys. The 2 other problems to solve thanks to AI technologies is perceptions. Meaning, for instance, if you want to provide a smooth customer experience, you need to understand what is asked by the end users by using, for instance, natural language understanding or natural language processing technologies. And the final problem to solve is the communication one. If you can also, on top of that, be able to detect some sentiments in the query sent by the end users, you will definitely provide a personalized experience, which is quite good. I will let the floor to Georg to continue on this AI topic.
Yes, thank you. I mean, yes, Matthew said, I mean, AI is an umbrella term over a very broad set of technologies and methods, but I want to maybe give you a few concrete examples from the world of finance to see how this is currently being applied. But before we get there, I think, and that applies not just in financial services, but broadly with any AI or big data application, more or less, that in almost all in all such projects, bulk of the work, which is in the getting the data ready to be for the algorithms to be applied on. So that means aggregating data, consolidating it, getting in the same format, cleaning it up, enriching it in a basic way. And typically 70% of the total effort of any kind of AI project is based on getting the data ready. And this is the unsexy part that is less talked about, but this, speaking from experience from my company, this is 70% of what we do. Many of the banks we work with are, this is what you have to do first, getting control of the data, getting them all in the kind of same platform and ready to be applied for. So that is something to really keep in mind. Otherwise, if that's not under control, then you have garbage in, garbage out. But once you have that in place, then the fun stuff begins, and you can start applying this in a focused way to very specific use cases or challenges, often with really good results. And now in the context of open banking, we have, I mean, a lot of banks and other non-banks that are looking to exploit open banking to build some kind of personal finance application. There is also the challenge of aggregating data from different financial institutions, and to, for example, for any kind of use case that helps people combine data from different banks into one, so they have a holistic view. And so that challenge of getting the data consolidated, aggregated, and consistent before you start applying it has become bigger. But this is moving at a pretty fast pace, and this is one of the core things that Manica does with its customers. But looking at the specific example then of what you can do. I'm just going to take two very concrete examples. So one is on segmentation, and this is using technology or algorithm called collaborative filtering, which would be classified as a type of machine learning algorithm. You may know this algorithm from Amazon when they recommend books based on those you've already read, or from Netflix based on recommending movies based on the movies you kind of watched in the past. And this is a pretty well-known algorithm that basically correlates a person's kind of historical data with also the whole universe of all users. So in the context of transactions and finance, what we have done, and is part of our solution, is we correlate people's spending, basically historical transactions, with spending data of all other users. And that the output of that is a certain kind of correlation matrix that tells us, in the context of individual users, which merchants or businesses are most interesting to these people. The center image there is supposed to try to visualize this algorithm. It's hard to visualize algorithms, but the different thickness of the lines between different merchants represents kind of strong or weak correlation. And the application, when you have built this kind of matrix for every user, is that you can do some very interesting things. For example, you can help people with discovery of new places or restaurants or cafes or whatever merchant they are likely to be interested in based on kind of their current spending patterns. And often, so people are used to this from the realm of books and movies, but not so much for spending. But we found it to work really well in many cases. So that if you go to this nightclub and these restaurants and shop in this bookstore, you might want to try out kind of this kind of merchant. The example to the left represents this, like based on your past spending in restaurants and other merchants, we are recommending 3 restaurants you are likely to kind of be interested in. And we can take that further and show which restaurants are trending, represented by the flame, show the price based on average spending in those restaurants, and so on, all based on only kind of historical anonymized transaction data of a set of users that has been correlated. And this can be very powerful. Also, it can be used for other things as well. If you look to the right, this is just a representation of a cashback offer. And if you have such a ranking of merchants for every user, you can do so much better job in kind of promoting discounts and offers, because most loyalty and discount programs today, you just have a bunch of discounts. They're not ordered or filtered for you. If aren't by this algorithm, we know that certain merchants are likely to be super interesting to people. Sometimes that's just common sense, like merchants that are people shop with frequently or very similar merchants, but also sometimes based on kind of more complicated correlations. And then if you only promote the offers or discounts at merchants that people really like, then they perceive this as great service rather than spam or annoying advertising. So that's one concrete example of an algorithm that works really well once you have the data under control. Another example, real quick, is from kind of upselling. One recent project we've done with a bank in the Nordics is to kind of, in a similar way, analyze transactions of all customers and kind of figure out which customers are more likely to want certain types of credit cards based on similar algorithms. And when you and the results of that is typically something around the 3x increase in the card uptake if you focus the sales message on the segment of users that have a spending pattern that correlates strongly to those that have already kind of are already using those credit card products. So instead of giving you many kind of broad examples and talking about, because AI, as Matthew says, AI, machine learning, these are just buzzwords and technology that are, like any other technology, meaningless unless you apply them to some real world problem and use case. That's where value is created. So these are two examples. I'm now going to hand it over to Maike, who's going to take a kind of deeper example with conversational UX. Over to you, Maike.
Thank you so much, Georg, but I think Matthew had a few things to say first about conversational banking.
Yes, thanks, Mike. No worry. Just few words regarding it. So we've just seen with Georg the importance of applying artificial intelligence and the role of artificial intelligence and AI technologies to qualify the data and to generate valuable insights to better engage the end users in an overall customer journeys and to bring real value to the end users. In the following slide, I just want to underline the other part of the iceberg, which is how once we have the insights and the data that is qualified, could we interact with the end users? And I guess that everybody around the call has already a mobile, has already played with its mobile or website, of course. But for us, the next way to engage the end users will definitely be thanks to conversations. And lots of our customers today, with which we are trying to help on this topic, are seeing conversational banking, in my opinion at least, and compare the conversational banking to chatbots. And for me, it's a restrictive vision of what is conversational banking. For me, conversational banking is wider than that. It's really a real strategy that has to be defined and implemented as the next steps to provide personalized experience, either on the text, but also on the voice channels, and taking into account natural languages. For me, it's key to think to such new interfaces. If you have a look on the three key figures below the definitions, for me, people are here. I mean, end users are ready to use such new interfaces. So you have definitely to define what is a conversational banking strategy. And to help our customers to think about what strategy could be applied, we are usually trying to apply this kind of framework, so the 4A framework. And the idea of the 4A framework is to help our customers to define the audience. At the end, what would be the audience of your conversational interfaces? Do you want to address SMEs, retail consumers? Inside these segments, do you want to address only Gen Y, millennials, and so on? So first, think to your audience. The second point, of course, which is maybe the first one, is aims. Map your conversational strategy to your business goals. Do you intend to reduce your costs on your conversational thanks to conversation on your customer services service? Do you intend to promote some products inside your conversations? So you have to map these business goals to the conversations. The third point is what is the approach you want to select to make more concrete your strategies. And behind this point, the idea is try to set priorities, try to identify the services you want to launch, and really think small first, and enhance the experience provided through conversational platforms by adding services in a progressive rollout. This is the idea. And at the end, apply the technologies based on your plan, which normally has been defined in the three previous steps. Before letting the floor to Michael, I just want to share with you two concrete applications of or for A framework. The first one is based on the experience launched by Bank of America with its Erica conversational platforms. I just want to point out 2 points. If you have a look on the audience, with Erica, Bank of America has reached more than 10 million of regular users on its conversational solution. More than 1/3 of its overall digital customers, which is quite huge. And what is interesting also to point out is the split of generations behind the consumers. If you have a look of the numbers below the audience, the general audience, you will see that of course around 50% of the audience are millennials, but 50% are other generations, and due to the convenience of providing digital services through such new interfaces. And the second point I just want to underline is if you have a look on the approach selected by Bank of America, you will remark that they have started small. They have started by providing classical daily banking services. So initially you were able to ask to Erica, okay, what is my balance? I just want to be in touch or take a rendezvous with my advisor. So start small, and they have in the next releases had more complex conversations to deliver more complex features to their end users, such as features around spending, about rewards, features around the merchant management and stuff like that. And the other concrete example I just want to share in a few seconds is the example of Capital One. Here, the only point I will point out is the approach. One more time, if you have a look of the strategy applied by Capital One, they have started in 2015 with a beta version, and they have applied a real progressive rollout of such a service by implementing first features and conversation around credit cards. You can easily consult credit card balance, but why not having conversation to block or unblock a card? I mean, it's not a complex features, and you can add it in such interface. And I will finish that part by just one slide, just to give you our recipe. It's our vision, our point of view. What could be the right and the good recipe to engage customers thanks to conversational AI? For us, there are 4 main points to address. First, you have to design the menu, of course. At the end, what is the value and what use case? What are the use cases you expect to deliver thanks to conversational experience? The second point is you have the menu, work on the recipe now. So define the conversational logic. You have a use case, how and what are the paths, the happy paths that have to be delivered to the end users. It's really important to work on the recipe, of course. Then select your ingredients. So more than working on each ingredient, you have to merge the ingredients, meaning on a conversational point of view, you need to define use case and think to the bridges between the use case. As an end user, I maybe want to ask information on my account by asking just what is my balances, but maybe I want quickly to switch to a transfer conversations and get back to information of my accounts. And you cannot and you don't have to provide siloed conversations. You really need to make bridges between conversations. And the last advice I could give is we've talked a lot about artificial intelligence and the way you can automate the delivery of digital services, but also think to human and how you will make the bridge and make the handover with the human. Because we are speaking about launching conversation on simple use cases first, but when you will implement a more complex one, probably your end user wants to get more precise advice, and only a human can give such advice. So make the bridge with humans. It's really important. And I let the floor to Michael which is our expert regarding the way to design conversations. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Thank you for all of this insight. And what my main takeaway from what you just said, Matthew, was about starting small, and that's exactly my advice as well. And that's something that will come up quite a few times. But let's take a step back and think about exactly that: the users, who they are, and how they are feeling about all of this conversational and artificial intelligence hype or usage. So most of all, what motivates people today to get into conversational, whether it's banking or otherwise, mostly it's about utilitarian, symbolic, and social benefits. And what does that mean? Well, basically that means that they want it to be an experience that is useful to them, so that they can accomplish a task that they esteem being useful. Social benefits is also about status, about being able to do this through conversational and brag a bit about it. Also, it's related to the fact that it has to be quick, that it's quicker, that it's more convenient. And I think that's a key takeaway, that if you are deciding which use case you will be implementing for your conversational banking, utilitarian motivation is really the biggest one. And so thinking about what is going to be useful to the user and what will enable the user to do things more quickly through conversational than otherwise. The biggest pain points with conversational, and especially when it comes to voice technology, for example, is the perceived security and privacy concerns. Obviously, this is not just a problem that is related to voice user interface devices. However, because these voice user interface devices are quite new, the threshold for establishing that trust with personal data is a lot higher. So that's something to take into account when you kind of decide on which use case are we going to start with. So let's talk about that a bit. Whenever people are faced with new interfaces, they go what we call through a journey of building trust. And so Nielsen Norman has a framework for this. It's called the pyramid of trust. And so basically, when you're confronted with a new interface, you go from having no trust at all in this new interface towards having a willingness to commit an ongoing relationship. When you think about it, a couple of years ago, we didn't all walk around with smartphones in our hands. And it's funny to see that today is actually the no smartphone day, because it has become such a habit that we now need days to not have it in our hands. Whereas a couple of years ago, we were still wary of trusting this device with our personal information, leaving our credit card numbers in apps, etc. And now we just give away our data without even thinking about it. So conversational interfaces will also go through this, what we call pyramid of trust. It will also move from no trust established at all to an ongoing relationship. And it is our goal, but also our duty when we decide upon use cases, when we decide to invest this conversational banking space, to make sure that the first interactions for our users are perceived as being useful. How do you move up into this pyramid of trust with your users? Well, by starting small, by starting with very basic features and showing them that they can trust your app, your conversational interface with these basic things, basic functionalities. A basic functionality can simply be, for example, like Matthew said, blocking your card. Something else that might be very interesting is just getting some broad information about the bank or about opening hours of banks near you and so forth. And then little by little, when these basic features are being perceived as useful, as being as successful, then users will more and more easily give you access to more personal information, and you will be able to tailor then with everything George explained, AI, etc., data, and you will be able to proactively give them content that is useful to them. But it's all about establishing a relationship. And so how do you establish a relationship other than starting small? Well, basically, there are four main components to creating trust. The first one is personalization, which gives the user the impression that you know them, because first step in a relationship is you know me. And so George talked about this quite a bit already with personalization, so I won't go into that a lot further, but it's a really important cornerstone. Proactive conversations. So a second step in establishing a relationship with the user is you know what I need. So having proactive conversations, just as also George told you about, being able to proactively suggest content is a good step toward creating that connection, creating that link. But that's just one side of the medal. That's just you tailoring to the user. The thing is, the user also has to have the feeling that they know you, that they know what you are about as a brand, that they know what this conversational interface is about, and that they know how you feel about them. It's a two-way street, and that's really important. So basically, how do you go about the fact that you can take this conversational connection into the entire consumer journey? Because as Matthew said, conversational is just not about just a chatbot. It's not about having a voice application on a voice smart speaker. It's about integrating conversational in every step of the way, every step of the customer journey, from discovery to conversion to the experience. And so basically, use cases you can tailor for each step of the way. For anonymous users, this can be about general topics like information about your products, about the bank, about the values of the bank. For a prospect, it can be about onboarding them, registering them, and engaging with them cross-channel. So not only after visiting your website, while conversational can be an extra link to create that connection to make sure that they become clients. And then for clients, it can be about tailored insights with secure and personalized conversational environment. And as you can see, as the user grows in trust, not only towards this conversational interface, but also towards your bank, you can also start building out more specific features and more secured features. So as I said, the fact that you take your customer and consumer by the hand and that you proactively give them content tailored to where they are in their customer journey will help you help them. So basically, there's three levels to this. First of all, obviously, when interacting with a conversational agent, the agent should be able to answer the question. If it isn't, if it can't, then you have to provide the user with a possible human handover, make sure that he gets the solution. Anticipate next question, actions, of course. So that's what George was also talking about. So you answer the actual question, you anticipate what the next action might be. As Matthew said, if you are looking at your balance, you might also want to do transfers just after, and then suggest useful content, as we said before. And so moving towards the user getting to know you, there are a few things that you can do, and they're mostly related to tone of voice. Your tone of voice, whether it's spoken or in written word, should be unique and on brand. Your bank or your financial business is not the same as someone else's. and that's really important. So your conversational content should integrate your overall brand image and be unique to your brand, make it stand out. You need to be adaptable to specific situation and emotion. You don't just decide on one tone of voice that goes through all your use cases. Tone of voice has to be in relation with what the user is going through. For example, someone whose credit card was just stolen or lost and is a very stressful situation would not at all handle well a very dynamic, pump it up content. And then be inclusive. So when you design your conversational agent, don't make it a character. You can give it a tone of voice and a personality, which is really important to make that connection without actually making it something personified. I usually say you don't have to be a white male with a red nose to be funny. And so I'm moving really quickly here because there's a lot to say about conversational UX design, but basically conversational UX is all about researching who your users are, knowing them, knowing what they need and when they need it. You can do this through quantitative and qualitative data, through user research, defining and prioritizing the use cases and the tone of voice we just talked about, designing the conversations, because AI is not just a machine that you feed a lot of data and then they just magically start talking. So there is some design work to be done around content, about information architecture, and then refine it with the usage. This is not an app that you make once and then you leave it out there for 6 months and see how it goes. Conversational design and conversational technology overall is an ongoing process and an ongoing refinement. And that's it. I'll leave the floor to you, Matthew.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Just as a conclusion, so I will let you conclude, Alex, but how could we help you if you have any questions or concern regarding the conversational banking topic? As I told you as an introduction, we are working closely and with Meniga and Michael, of course, to help our customer on such a topic, especially thanks to our conversational platforms allowing to support several conversation in the banking area, and putting the expertise of Meniga in terms of transaction categorization and insights, and the expertise of Michael in the design of conversations. So one more time, thanks for having listeners, and I let you the floor, Alex, is fine for us. And one more time, thanks for joining this webinar.
Yes, so I would say, firstly, thank you very much to Mathieu, George, and Micah. What a thoroughly interesting webinar. An awful lot of information in there, as you can all imagine, with the topic so fresh and growing so fast. I just want to repeat that we have a short period of time for some questions now, which we'll do in a second, and a reminder that this recording will be made available on demand. From my perspective, there's definitely a few slides there that I'd like to listen back on. But thanks, guys. That was really interesting. So let's get straight into questions. As we mentioned at the beginning, you can use the dashboard now to ask any questions you have. If they relate to a specific slide, just let us know what that is. So, Micah, as we closed off with you, we'll start off with you on the questions. And the one here that we've got is, we've spoken a lot about data and AI, but how do you take care of privacy, data protection, and this type of topic? Any thoughts on that?
Well, there's quite a lot to say about it, but I'll try not to go off into a rant. But definitely privacy and security, that's one of the biggest pain points today for users. So it's definitely something that you need to address, but you don't only need to address it from a conversational point of view, but I think it needs to be part of the overall reflection that we have towards digital banking products. More and more security issues are being surfaced And of course, we also have the GDPR to take into account. These are things that don't have to be seen as complicating the conversational journey, but on the contrary, I think they are reassuring towards the user and help build that trust I was talking about. Some strategies around that have to do with very traditional 4-digit codes and so forth, but there are also a lot of more evolved technologies starting to be really performing with biometrics and voice biometrics that are really interesting to look into and look out for. I think, Matthew, perhaps you can add to that.
Yeah, I would maybe just add one point. You mentioned the GDPR topic. I think that everyone around the call knows that GDPR means also harming the consent of the end users. So for me, one of the key topics to address on top of the biometric aspect and the strong customer authentication is how do you foresee the capture of the consent of the end users in a conversation? I mean, so just thinking to apply some information in the conversation just to inform at least the end users about how this data would be used in such a conversations, and to get its formal approval is already a good point and a good practice in my vision. And the other point is what is key in such a topic, especially in the conversational topic, is you will need to train your systems to make it smarter and smarter. Meaning that we absolutely need to keep a track of the conversations. But who says you have to keep track of conversations means you will store data. So what are the algorithms that could be applied to cipher these conversations? What is the strategies that could be applied to archive such a conversation in case of a dispute and stuff like this? We have solutions for that. I mean, but yes, we absolutely and definitely need, in my vision at least, to take care about the end user's consent and to find strategy around the strong customer authentication and the way we are storing the data, especially the conversations for the training purpose. This is my vision on that.
Okay, thank you, Mathieu. So let's move on to you, George. A second question we've got here, and I read it like this: We've talked about PFM, mainly focused on the retail banking consumers. What's your vision on the BFM topic and the way to provide financial insights to SMEs and corporates?
No, that's a great question. I mean, although my company has primarily worked on the PFM side for individuals and households, we also do considerable work with particularly smaller corporates, so SMEs and kind of sole proprietors. And we find that many of the things we work on for households and individuals are super relevant as well for SMEs, and some even more relevant. Small business owners and employees are very busy people. They value time-saving things enormously. So there are certain use cases that resonate very strongly there, such as kind of simple weekly and monthly summaries, short-term cash flow projection and management, really help them at a glance understand what's happening in the next 2 weeks. Are my customers paying me? Am I late paying my suppliers? And so on. And also we find generally that we think there's an opportunity for banks in many markets there. This feels to me to be an underserved market. And once you can help SMEs with a kind of cash flow management, you can also help them with a cash conversion cycle through credit and other things. There are more examples, like just simple case of searching for transactions, convenient for people, but for like a company with 10 people with a lot of customers and many transactions made sometimes across many bank accounts, just that use case can save enormous amount of time. We found in research with one Nordic bank. So yeah, I mean, SMEs is a very relevant segment to serve in this way as well.
Thank you. Mathieu, anything to add on the BFM topic?
No, nothing to add. I think it's worth. Yeah.
Okay, well, we We do have, we've got 1 minute left, so it's a quick fire round, if you like. And yeah, let's start with you, Mathieu. So what will the next must-have features in the conversational platform of tomorrow be?
Good question, Alex. For me, definitely it will be the fact to take into account the sentiment or behavior analysis features. So being able to catch signals regarding the sentiments of the end users to better handle human handover, for instance, and such like this.
Okay.
We are the premise of such features.
Okay, thank you. Micah, any thoughts on the must-have features for of tomorrow?
Yes. I could totally agree with Matthew. And then I would say that it's great to be able to analyze the sentiment and behavior of the users, but it's even better if you take it a step further and then tailor the conversation towards those sentiments that you've analyzed. And so, yeah, taking things further, I think it has to be about making sure that we provide value and integrating, as George said as well, conversational banking, not as banking per se, but as service, as providing a service and being a partner to our customers' day-to-day lives, money being an enabler of life choices.
Okay, and very quickly, George, any final words for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we are most interested in there and believe that where this is headed is to, in summary, in a nutshell, help people become smarter consumers. I think we'll see much more of not just discounts and offers, but really more sophisticated ways of helping people optimize their subscription and kind of have businesses compete for their business. There's an enormous kind of evolution in this topic. So kind of merging transaction data with smart kind of coaches or virtual coaches or virtual assistants that can help people optimize their spending. I think there is a lot of value to be created there.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So we've just passed the hour. From my perspective, I want to say thank you to Worldline once again for partnering with us to deliver another kind of very interesting webinar from the cutting edge. Personal thanks to Mathieu, George and Micah for taking their time to put these slides together and presenting it in such an interesting way. As mentioned before, this will be made available very soon, and wish you all a very good day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.